You can see him in editor's eyes occasionally. And he goes, Satanists. Write me an article on Satanists. So I ended up interacting with various Satanists from various satanic sects. And while you're researching a subject, at least for me, I like to do a lot of deep research to see if there's anything that's interesting that I could have missed if I didn't go deep on it. And I ultimately came across a U.S. Customs report on a cult called the Finders, and two of the Finders were dressed very nicely, and they had six kids with them in Tallahassee, Florida. And a concerned citizen called the police and said that there might be child abuse going on. And the kids were like feral. They were only allowed to eat as a reward. They were outside. And there's a woman named Elizabeth Voss who has written a nice three-part series on the Finders because a lot of documentation about the Finders was just released last year. It tried to cover it up, and she did a nice job of looking between the lines. And with the Finders, the U.S. Customs got involved because U.S. Customs has a branch that's anti-child pornography. And they executed a search warrant on the Finders warehouse, and they came across pretty mind-boggling stuff. I mean, they came across pictures of nude kids, quote unquote, appearing to accent the child's genitals. They came across kids disemboweling a goat. They came across a telex said that two kids were going to be purchased in Hong Kong, and that someone in the embassy would facilitate the purchasing of two kids. And there was all these different ways to get kids. And there was something truly nefarious about all this. And then on the last page of this U.S. Customs report, Ramon Martinez, the U.S. Customs officer, reports to the Washington, D.C. police who helped execute the warrant. And the police officer was only willing to speak to him with anonymity. And he said that the CIA has taken this investigation over, and there will be no more investigation on the Finders. And then the Finders were let out of jail, and all their child abuse charges were dropped. And then all of a sudden, in the Washington Post, we read about the Finders being a cult of peace, love, and brown rice. And I read that, and I kind of thought I knew how the world worked at that point. I mean, I knew that the CIA was involved in like Guatemala and Chile and Iran. I mean, whenever the interests of multinational corporations were jeopardized because of a socialist or semi-socialist president or dictator taking over that particular country. I mean, I knew that the CIA acted, and I was aware of some other stuff, but that really, that was it. I said, what have I missed in life that the CIA is covering up for a bunch of nefarious people that are abusing children? I mean, what have I missed? So that was the thing that started my odyssey, and I tried to get as much information on the Finders as I possibly could, but nobody was really talking about the Finders. The Washington Post had interviewed this psychologist about the Finders, and he offered these deep anthropological insights into the Finders as if he was, tracking some strange animal on the plains of the Serengeti. So I got his number and I called him up and I said, my name is Nick Bryant. I'm a writer. I'm researching the Finders. And this guy said, no comment. And so obviously something had happened to him between the time that I talked to him and between the time he talked to the Washington Post. And everybody was shut down. Ramon Martinez wouldn't talk about it. I could not get any kind of documentation. Years later, I would get the Tallahassee police report where a doctor said that two of the kids had been sexually abused. But then I heard about Franklin, about that network possibly having ties to the CIA. That's what led me to Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay, so like in Omaha, Nebraska, Franklin Credit, this guy Lawrence King. Can you talk about like who is this guy? Where did he come from? and like how did he rise to the like to the heights of power and running this unspeakable criminal network of, like I said, yeah, evil and child abuse.
Well, that's the thing. I commented on it a little bit earlier. Lawrence King was born into a very blue collar family. His father worked at one of the slaughterhouses in Omaha, and he grew up seemingly a normal person, but he had a top security clearance, and he was sent to. And there isn't really prior to that. There's nothing that really sticks out as major malfeasance, criminality, or pedophilia. Now, I could have missed something on him. That's entirely possible. But when he comes back from Southeast Asia, and the same thing with Spence, when both of them come back from Southeast Asia, their careers start to skyrocket. With the Franklin Credit Union, King got Warren Buffett's wife to kick in, I think 1.5 million, but don't quote me on the money. So although Warren Buffett would disavow any kind of relationship, his wife did in fact give the Franklin Credit Union money. So because, and this is what I believe, and I've been at this for about 20 years, King was a pedophile, just a straight up pedophile. And I think that started to work for this very shadowy, malignant intelligence network that traffics children and blackmails politicians. The same is true with Epstein. Epstein came from a blue collar background in Coney Island. He was a college dropout, but at some point, his career just kind of skyrocketed too. And I think that both can be traced to their pandering of children for intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, I like like the similarities between King and Epstein are quite stark, and I'm thinking about a quote in your book. I believe when like talking to one of the victims, a guy Rogers, I believe, he conveyed to his sister and brother-in-law a rather mind-boggling account of that power. Power brokers had the code juice to completely erase people's backgrounds and insert them into high-ranking political positions. And like that immediately made me think of Epstein, a guy who, just a high school graduate who out of nowhere becomes like a math professor at one of New York City's most prestigious private schools, and then is given. Put in charge of managing an astonishing amount of money in a private wealth fund because he's supposedly a math genius. But like, yeah, like there's just these huge gaps and like this questions that are have to be asked about like who are these seeming nobodies who are suddenly inserted into positions of such prominence and power.
Well, I think that nobodies are chosen for a particular reason because you can get rid of them. They're disposable to their masters in intelligence. If you had someone who is from a famous family, a family with power, there could be some blowback. But with someone like King or Spence, Spence was also from a blue collar family too. Someone like King, Spence, or Epstein from a blue collar family, uh, there's not going to be any blowback if they turn up dead, which Spence and Epstein both turned up dead, apparent suicides. And then King kept his mouth shut and he was put in a psychiatric institution, first in Springfield, Missouri, and then ultimately in Rochester, Minnesota, where he had to do time. He had to do 10 years for his financial crimes. He wasn't, there wasn't any child abuse indictments against him whatsoever. So he did 10 years, and then he had a no-show job at a BMW dealership in Virginia when he got out.
With King and Epstein, and I know a little bit more about Epstein's like pre-blackmail ring days, just because of the extent of the coverage on it and how it's like a little more recent. But I mean, the weird thing with Epstein is how early it started, right? I mean, he was a college dropout who was pretty early on. There was some weird shit going on because William Barr's father
Yeah.
allowed him to be a math teacher at one of Manhattan's most prestigious private schools. And so probably pretty early on he was spotted, if not like institutionally, by like an individual who had similar like fucked up proclivities. But I thought it was interesting what you said about someone with a blue collar background can be discarded more easily.